to the meeting. This meeting is an update on a meeting we held in March of last year. And Liz, can you please switch on the, oh, you've started the recording, thank you. First agenda item is apologies for absent. Liz?
Thank you. We've received apologies from Councillor Mary Jones, Cabinet members Andrew Stevens and Andrew Lewis, and from Sarah Lackenby.
Yeah, I know Andrew Stevens, he's taking his dad down to the hospital, so I knew he couldn't get here today. Second agenda item is disclosures of interest. Personal or prejudicial, any? I take silence as golden. Item 3 is prohibition, whipped votes and declarations of party whips. No, okay. Item 4 is letters from the previous meeting. I'd like to bring your attention to page 5, where we had 11 conclusion points. Is there any questions from members on any of them? No, okay. Any public questions, Liz?
No, we haven't received any.
Okay. Can I ask who's taking this report?
Adrian's going to take the report.
Adrian. Okay, thank you, Adrian. Is it possible for you to put it up, share it up on the screen and go through the...
Yeah, certainly I can do that. Bear with me if I can work the technology to do that.
Yeah.
Yes, so this is, Chair, this is obviously a detailed report following on from a previous report that was submitted in the spring of last year to consider the impact of the COVID pandemic on the workforce, and this is really to some extent an update on many of the items that were considered or were being asked to consider at that time, and to provide you an update, particularly around the consultation that's taken place in respect of the staff survey, and Rian will I'm sure come in towards the end of the presentation to talk around the issues with regard to the staff survey. So basically, the document sets a scene in respect of the COVID-19 pandemic, and identifying that in respect of the workforce issues. Obviously, that was a key consideration for us as officers, and of course for you as members, to ensure that our workforce were suitably accommodated, suitably supported, in addressing the issues that we had to face in dealing with COVID. The first item, item 2 around agile working and the use of technology, just a reiteration of the situation that we were in this time last year with regard to the provision of equipment and development of an agile working strategy and approach to support our workforce who were required to work from home and are continuing to work from home, certainly for the near future. And that has involved, as I say, in terms of provision of IT equipment and development of an agile working policy, which is now in place and being worked towards in respect of all of our workforce who are working in that agile working space from home. Item 3 talks about the changes in headcount and FTE, and there has been increases up to December 2021, primarily through an increase in our traineeships in waste and management, which has helped us manage our workforce in that area. And I think you'll appreciate that at the moment we have a large number of agency workers in that area, and traineeships are a process that's been put in place to convert wherever possible those agency roles into traineeship roles. In resources, there's been an increase that's primarily due to the increased resource that we've required to support on TTP and vaccination line delivery. Education schools, there's been an increase primarily because of the need to increase numbers to support our catering and cleaning provision in schools as a result of COVID-19. And in social services, there have been increases and will continue to be a need for recruitment in social services to support the provision of services in that particular directorate, particularly around social care staff, but also our social workers as well. And you can see on the numbers there that there's been that increase across the different directorates. Item 4 is the age profile of the workforce. That hasn't changed significantly since our last report, but you can see that in terms of our age profile, particularly pertinent in this graph here, indicates that we have got quite a scale of the age of our workforce in the ages of 40 to 49, and then particularly ages 50 to 59. And in terms of our workforce planning, that's one of the key activities that we'll be working on with directorates to try and, shall we say, straighten out that profile as much as we possibly can. In terms of the grade profile, again, that is largely unchanged. 60% of our posts are occupied by women, 40% by men, and the only grades with more men than women are grade 7 and grade 12, but that is a sort of relatively marginal split. In terms of our permanent and temporary workforce and how that's determined by gender, you can see that 40.93% of our workforce are male, 59.07% of our workforce are women. The majority of our male workforce are in full-time roles. The split between full-time and part-time roles for women is more in favour of part-time roles for that element of our workforce. Agency workers, there was an internal audit of the management of agency workers policy that took place in the autumn of 2021 to ensure compliance with that particular policy. I think I've noticed from some of the questions there is concern that has been highlighted through the audit committee and certainly by other discussions that about the number of agency workers, particularly in waste parks and cleansing primarily. And while I can't give you an update on those figures today, I can certainly provide you with an update after the meeting. But you know, there are plans in place, as was indicated earlier, that we would look to implement traineeship schemes to certainly minimise the number of agency workers in that area. The number of agency workers in social services has increased due to obviously the sort of demands on the service, additional demands on the service that has arisen as a result of COVID primarily. Item 8 around sickness absence, that demonstrates that there has been an increase in sickness absence. That is primarily due to the fact that, you know, areas of the council have returned back to work as services have resumed, which has resulted in an increase in the average day's sickness. There are pockets of high sickness absence, for example, corporate building services, waste parks and cleansing, and adult services and child and family, and also in education planning and resources. And those are primarily our catering and cleaning teams in education. And in response to that, a number of roles have been recruited into sickness absence officers roles to support those directorates in managing sickness in those key areas in particular. Item 9 then refers to the specific activities that we've put in place in response to COVID-19 around volunteering, redeployment and reallocation of resources, the TTP activities, and there was an awful lot of work that went into that to recruit into and train those TTP teams. And employee relations activities, we've continued with the fortnightly meetings with our trade unions to support on a whole range of HR and health and safety issues to ensure that our staff are properly supported during this time. But also, in addition to that, we have been working with trade unions to develop social partnership working to improve on what we believe are already good relationships with our trade unions in working in partnership between ourselves as officers, trade union representatives, and also our members, particularly through David Hopkins, who regularly attends the fortnightly trade union meetings. Corporate health and safety training, those activities have continued, and certainly the risk assessments that are required for all areas continue to be monitored and consulted on with trade unions. Occupational health, under item 11, this provides a summary of the situation up to December 21 in terms of the referrals that the occupational health and stress management and counselling services have provided to the workforce. I won't go into that detail there, but the detail is obviously there in terms of those numbers. So that leads on to staff survey. Rhian, are you able to pick up the reins on the staff survey?
Yeah, certainly, Adrian. So in July this year, the staff survey was undertaken for a month, for 2 months. There's a separate appendix with the details of that survey, and there was key results outlined. I'm not sure if you want me to go through the appendix now. I think I should. It's probably a good time. The survey was made available online and via our internal and external websites, and hard copies were made available to all of our satellite locations. And it was the first time we'd undertaken a survey since 2018. The reason for the break was CMT and leadership agreed that there would be a break in the survey to review the service, the questions, and then obviously the pandemic hit. So that's the reason why there was a bit of a gap in terms of the surveys. The focus of this particular survey was changed to focus on the impact of COVID and a recovery as a council. So as that is the case, many of the questions included in this survey are new, and we can't make comparisons for previous years. 993 people completed the survey this time, which is a 14% response, which is 10% less than the 24% response rate we received last time. We only had 46 hard copies completed, which is quite a drop in response rate from hard copies. The drop in response rate could result as many things. More staff are working from home. Their staffing their work patterns have changed, so staff possibly could be feeling less connected to the council. There's also issues in terms of workload as we recover from the pandemic. However, measures to increase the response rate in the future will need to be explored, and that process already began really. As part of this year's survey, we included some questions around the workforce strategy. It was a good opportunity to get our staff engaged in that. Just some of the key results then from the 2001 survey. So as I said, some of the questions were around COVID. So impact of COVID, we asked some questions around staff, their well-being, both before and after COVID. So 59% said they were currently happy, contented, relaxed in terms of their well-being, compared to 63% before COVID. So this kind of demonstrates a slight decrease of well-being amongst staff from pre and during COVID. We asked some questions about where staff work, and as you would expect, there's a massive difference in terms of people working from home now and compared to before COVID. We also asked some questions about returning to work. If you just scroll down slightly, Adrian, sorry.
Yeah.
Yes, we asked about how staff felt about returning to the office and site. As you are aware, it's an ever-changing landscape in terms of when we can and can't return to work. But as a council, we felt that we needed to find out what staff were thinking at the time. It's actually largely positive in terms of 66% felt they felt confident to return to their workplace. Felt very confident, 90% about travelling to their workplace. 66% were happy to return to the office / on site when allowed. And 62% stated they weren't worried or anxious about returning on site. It does demonstrate, however, that some measures may need to be put in place to increase staff confidence in returning to work. Obviously, this was undertaken from July to September, so obviously things may have changed, but that's what the feeling of the staff was at the time. So the most positive areas then from this survey, I'm trusted to do my job. 96% of staff felt that they were trusted to do their job. This is compared to 92% last time, which is an increase of 4%. I have regular contact with my manager. 88% of staff agreed with that. I have clear direction and know what is expected of me. 88% of staff agreed with that. And then I suppose the least positive, although they are all positive percentages, I'm more productive than I was 12 months ago. 69% of staff agreed with that. I feel connected to what's happening at work. 77% of staff agreed with that. And I'm happy with my work-life balance. 77% of staff agreed with that. In every staff survey we've done since inception, we've been asking some questions about bullying and harassment. Overall, the number of staff who state they've experienced bullying and harassment has decreased compared to the last survey. There has been a slight increase of 1% in the instance from service users compared to last time, although 70% of those who state they experienced harassment and bullying did not report it, which is 14% more than the last survey. And there's just a table there which just outlines those results in a bit more detail, broken down by service users, managers, colleagues and members, in terms of where they reported it or not. Following the survey, we went to the trade unions to discuss the low response rate and to see their views really on how this could be improved in the future. They had some suggestions which are outlined below, and our comments to those suggestions are outlined in the table. They suggested possibly using work mobiles with staff no internet. We'd have to look at that. And all the other kind of suggestions are outlined there. And these are things that we will have to take on board and look to see if what we can do for the next survey. Some of these things we have tried in the past, as you'll see by the table, but it's always worth exploring again for the future. The results from the staff work survey, these were the questions that we included on the workforce strategy. So as I said, as part of this year's survey, we added these questions which have directly impacted or been considered as part of Adrian's workforce strategy. I don't know whether you want to come in on this bit, Adrian.
Yeah, thanks, Rhian. Yeah, so as Rhian said, we included for the first time some questions relating to the workforce strategy that's been proposed, and there are a number of sort of statements that we asked employees to comment on that related to the different strands that are in the strategy. And the first one was around culture and behaviours, whether employees understood the council's vision and values. And you can see that there was a strong agreement that they did understand the council's vision and values. We're talking about figures here of just under 90% in those areas there. In terms of future leadership, we asked the question, do we believe we have the right skills to lead the council in the future? A slightly lower positive response rate to that particular question. Future workforce in terms of structures, this was one of the sort of the least positive, should we say, responses, in that 71.6% of our workforce agreed that we had the right structures, but there were, should we say, a significant percentage that disagreed with that or strongly disagreed. In terms of recognising performance, again, 83.6% agreed or strongly agreed that management communicates and expectations and feedback. And then being an employer of choice, in terms of recommending Swansea as an employer of choice, 88.7% of those agreed with that particular statement. In terms of recruitment and retention, again, this was a least positive response in that only 64.3% of our workforce felt that we had the right tools to help us recruit and retain the best employees for the future. And again, in terms of workforce development, a least positive response in terms of the numbers of staff who agreed that they were supported in their personal and professional development. Health and well-being, again, one of the least positive responses. Equality in the workplace, quite a high positive response in respect of those areas. So that helped us inform further consultations with our workforce through a number of focus groups that were held with a cross-section of staff from across the council. And has helped us develop the proposed workforce strategy, which will be going through to CMT and Cabinet this month with a view to agreement and being able to put that strategy in place for 2022-25. In addition to consultation with staff, and that should include trade unions in that, we've also had a number of consultations with members in different forums to get their view and input into that strategy. And as I say, all of those comments have helped inform the strategy going forward. If I sort of go back to the point around the workforce strategy in the document, you can see that in terms of the proposed workforce strategy, there are 4 themes that have been identified around leadership and management, and underneath the strands of culture and behaviours, future leadership and the future shape of the organisation. And again, that's reflected on some of the comments that have been made through the survey and the customer employee focus group. The second theme is about developing a workforce fit for the future, and that's about future workforce, but also recognising the performance. Third theme being an employer of choice, and again picking up on the comments with regard to recruitment and retention and workforce development. There are a number of activities that sit under those particular strands to help us become an employer of choice and an exemplar employer in the Swansea West Wales region. And the fourth theme is all about how we look after our workforce with regard to supporting our workforce in their health and well-being, but also in dealing with issues around equality and ensuring our workforce is supported in that respect, but also that we support the aim of, if you like, of having a workforce that reflects the communities that we serve. So we come to the last section, section 14, around the overall assessment. Really, to some extent, we've continued through this COVID crisis to maintain services and to build on services supporting our employees who are working from home, but also supporting our employees who are on the front line, shall we say, to continue to provide the services across the whole range of services. So if I can stop there, can I? And I'll close down. I'll take any questions if that's okay.
Yeah. I'd like to thank you, Adrian and Rhiannon, for putting this report together. Well presented. Councillor Hopkins, is there anything you want to say before we go into questions?
No, I'd just like to put on record my thanks to the staff. I think this has been a very difficult 2 years. I think, at the end of the day, our HR and Occupational Health and trade unions have worked very, very well in that period. I think we've learned a few lessons. I know our ambitions was about agile working and taking that agenda forward. I think it just showed us, it put us in the right place. The work we'd already done, we were more prepared for COVID, and I thought we really were. So, I think congratulations on the work we've done there. But to be honest with you, it's remarkable. I can remember going to the trade unions some 2 years ago now, near enough 2 years ago, and asking for flexibility. Never thought that flexibility would go to the depth it did or how long it lasted. And I think our biggest asset have always been our staff, always will be our staff, and I congratulate them for the work they've done, the way they've worked with us. We wouldn't have been able to continue delivering service throughout the Swansea without that flexibility, without that commitment. We couldn't have done it without them, although we provided leadership support. They've really, really delivered and gone over and above. So I got nothing else to add to the report, only put on record my thanks, particularly to Adrian and Adam for the way that they've also led with the trade unions and worked very closely with the risk assessments. It hasn't been an easy process. It's been very difficult, and I keep saying we couldn't have done it without that partnership team as well. So nothing more to add, but more than happy to add to any questions as we go along. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you, David. I can see 5 hands up. I take it now. I'm gonna take this the virtual hands up as additional questions. So before I go into the written questions I've got down, thanks for your patience, Joe. Joe, your hand is up.
Yeah, cheers, Chair. Adrian, I should really start off by following on from David Hopkins and thanking all those staff that turned out to work, pandemic or not. And, you know, these guys done exactly the same thing as they would have done on their normal days at work. So none of them work from home, didn't they? I mean, a great shout out to the bin men and to the care workers in Swansea. And they were going into an environment where they didn't know what was going to happen to them. They weren't sort of sitting behind the scenes. They were actually doing the job. And I still think that we have to find another way to reward them, because they were absolutely excellent. And from day one, they turned up, they done their job under extreme pressure, under extreme stress and anxiety. And I just hope that all those guys are given the support that they deserve moving forward. Just on your report, Adrian, do we know the proportion of staff that were working from home or are working from home?
You're on mute, Dave.
Myself on mute there, sorry about that. The proportion of staff that work from home are primarily those, obviously, office worker staff. I can come back to you with a proportion of those. I don't have the exact numbers off the top of my head in that respect, but certainly, you know, the vast number of staff who are working in the Civic Centre and the Guildhall and, you know, other office locations have worked from home and continue to work from home in the majority of cases.
Sorry, what I meant was the proportion of all our staff.
Right. I can come back to you. I can come back to you with those percentage figures.
Thanks very much. Just really an observation. Really pleased to hear about the trainership roles, because we all should be looking to maybe train and develop our staff, and especially those that are coming in from the outside and having to work for an agency, because we all know the reason agency workers, or a huge percentage of agency workers and temporary employees come into the public sector, is try to gain a substantive post. I think everybody, all the data shows that. So that's really good. The female part-time workers, what percentage are low paid? Do we have the figures on that? And if we could we share them?
Well, I couldn't give the exact percentage, but I would say that there would be a large number of workers who are in that category, because they will, you know, without sort of prejudging it, there will be people who will be working part-time roles in the social care sector, in our catering and cleaning teams, and so on.
And my experience there, Adrian, especially in the local health services, you know, we get so many female workers part-time coming onto us saying, why can't we have full-time employment? We need the money. We want more hours. And I think we need to see more full-time female. But there's a difference between advertising just part-time low-paid work, isn't there, and a difference in advertising full-time low-paid jobs. So
yeah, and I think just to add to that, what we do find is that there are a number of our employees who will undertake multiple roles. So they might have a role as a in our schools as a in our catering team, but they might also have another role elsewhere in the council, which to some extent skews the figures, I guess. But certainly there are opportunities for staff wherever that's possible to work the hours that we need them to work.
Yeah, I'm just of an age now where when I went to school, most of the catering staff in my school were full time. So
yeah,
maybe it might be an idea to look at how we put vacancies out and whether we could actually start trying to employ more full-time low-paid workers, and who just happen to be women, and maybe less part-time and more full-time. But that's a challenge, isn't it?
It is a challenge, and in terms of our recruitment and retention activities, we are looking at all aspects of our recruitment approach to ensure that we get, should we say, the right people into the organisation at the right level, and give everybody the opportunity to have a job or a career in Swansea that they might not feel that they're able to at the moment.
It's just I find this in health as well. There's a disparity in female workers at the lower end. There seems to be a disparity. So, and it's been raised there. And my final question: recently, I was told in a meeting that the reason that there hadn't been so many agency workers taken on into the waste area was that there's an entry exam. And I'm wondering if you could supply a copy of the entry exam. I never knew that. I know there's an entry exam to get into Cambridge and Oxford, but I didn't realise there was an entry exam for a dustman.
Right. Okay. Well, I'm not sure if it would be classed as an entry exam. I would imagine that in terms of the assessment process for any role, they would need to go through some form of assessment, which might mean some form of test. Again, I can find out more detail around that, but I'm not sure that it would be an entry exam as such in those terms.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna cut you short there now, Joe, because other people have got questions as well. Adam, I don't know if you want to come in any points there, please.
Yeah, if I can. Thank you, Chair. It was just to get some clarification, because there was a question there asked about which of our staff are working from home in terms of what percentage. And I just want to make sure that we answer the question that's asked, really, if we're going to go away and find more information, because at what point are we talking about? Because obviously we had staff before the pandemic who were working from home, working agilely, working at lots of different sites. We had schools who have also worked at home and also worked in school. So we've also got people like environmental health officers who their base was at home, but they still went out into the field. So it's understanding what the question is, because I could answer it in lots and lots of different ways, and I don't really want to spend a lot of time for the officers finding it. It's when you've got that, what do you need it for, so that we can help make sure we get that right question. In terms of the second part in relation to part-time workers, actually it's more than part-time workers. Part of the reason we're redoing the workforce strategy is to look at how we recruit, how we select, how we pull people in, how we make sure they get a balance of life, making sure that we are paying appropriately, hence why we have a pay policy which will be coming to council in the next few weeks. Well, it'll finally come to council, sorry, in March. So I wouldn't want to just label one particular sector of our recruitment market. Actually, we need to think about diversity, equality, protected characteristics. Yeah. All those things need to come in and play a part in terms of who we recruit and where we recruit and what we do, and make sure we give a fair price, fair wage, sorry, for the people that we're employing. And the final point is we don't have any entrance exams for any of our positions at all. What we do have is a selection criteria that we need to go through to make sure that whoever's applying, there has to be a selection process. And in doing that, we need different assessments to go through in order to get them and select who is the best person to fit that job. So it's normal practice within HR world. They do it across everywhere. We're no different, and that's the same for all jobs that we do across the council. There is a selection and assessment criteria, of which many of you will have been involved in, probably if you were part of the selection committee for any of the positions on the council. Thank you, Chair.
I'm sure Joe can clarify what he wants to put in the conclusion at the end of the meeting so that we can put it through in a letter. Yvonne, you're next on questions.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks both Adrian and your colleague, whose name slips my mind at the moment. Okay, so Adrian. Rian, sorry, Rian, apologies. When you started, you talked about employing agency staff, and I was wondering, and you might have answered this, but if we have vacancies, and I know some of those will be because people are off ill and we have vacant agency staff, isn't there the opportunity to offer employment to agency staff? Because my experience is that they cost quite a lot, as opposed to if they're in full-time regular employment. I've got a few questions, but I'll come back to some of them later on. My other question is, with social service, I accept it won't be so easy with social services, but with staff illness, I know that we have a return to work and a follow-up, but do we follow up? And is there the opportunity for people to anonymously phone up and maybe speak to someone? Because I think with the pandemic, the lockdown, with working from home, even without these things, we have stress, upsets, domestic violence in particular, which is an issue I personally, come across quite a bit. But you come to work, you act as if everything is okay, and people, a lot of women, a lot of people, men as well, you don't necessarily want to walk in and sit opposite someone and say, this is the issue. So I was just thinking, do we have another way of someone phoning up and saying, this is an issue, I got battered last night, or my kids are off the rails, so I'm quite depressed, or my kids are ill, or whatever.
Yeah. So if I answer that question first, our occupational health team, as is indicated in the report, deal with a large number of responses from staff in respect of the provision of a whole range of services. In addition to that, there is the Helping Hands helpline, which is a team of our workforce who can provide that confidential advice, support and counselling to employees who may be going through a whole range of issues, obviously some of which you've exemplified there. So for me, there is that provision there, both and any sort of discussions that are held with the occupational health team will be confidential. And will be treated with the utmost of sensitivity. On the agency, sorry, you're on mute.
Sorry, go ahead.
Don't come back on that.
I was just going to say I appreciate all of that, and I'm fully aware of all of that, but it's not anonymous. it's not anonymous with the person that's phoning in.
Right.
So that's just something for you to think about. You
Right.
know, I don't really expect an answer or solution right now.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
Thanks.
okay, the next.
Yeah. So on the agency point, if I just sort of I suppose reflect back on what you said, it's about engaging agency workers where there is sickness and giving them the opportunity to progress to full-time roles. Is that right?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, in terms of our agency worker numbers, you can see from the figures that primarily those are in our waste packs and cleansing area. You know, as we've indicated, you know, there are measures being taken in our sort of cleansing area, but also in our waste management area to reduce the number of agency workers, giving them the opportunity to apply for and be considered for more permanent roles in the council. Some people choose not to, that they prefer being employed on an agency worker basis. Some will take the opportunity to apply for and in the majority of cases be successful for those traineeship roles and other roles within the council. I think to some extent we will always have agency workers because, you know, there will always be the need to bring in people flexibly to provide essential services. And you know, and that will mean sometimes covering for staff who are absent through sickness.
Thanks very much, Adrian.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Oh, David, you put your hand down. Okay. Next.
Sorry, Chair, could I just do just one bit for Yvonne, if I may?
Yeah.
Just in terms of where you talked about domestic violence, which is probably slightly different to all the other topics that you mentioned to do with sickness or child welfare and so on. There are particular specific helplines which are confidential that any staff member or any party, a resident or otherwise, can get in touch with, and that is for professional advice, support. They will link in with the police if they need to. We publicise those all through our policy on domestic violence for both men and women, also for those that are seeking harassment or being seeked for harassment for protected characteristics. So there's a lot of help out there that we will signpost into that's readily available and supplied across the authority. We've also undertaken training with leadership and senior management team in relation to domestic violence and to managers to make sure that they are looking out for it, can be sympathetic, understanding, and that everybody is aware of where they need to signpost to in order to give anybody any help, support or guidance that they need. Domestic violence, we will zero tolerance to any sort of domestic violence, and so we will continue to push that wherever we can so that everybody does feel supported. I just thought we ought to mention that one. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much, Adam. Thanks.
Thanks, Adam. Leslie?
Just to check with you, Chair, are you actually going to go through the questions we put together yesterday? Because my questions are from that, so I'll wait for you to go through that list.
That's right.
Okay.
The answers that were up were additional questions. Thanks anyway, Les. Right, or Cheryl. Cheryl, your hand is up.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Question for Adrian. I really apologise if we'd had that report that you galloped through earlier on, because if we did, I hadn't read it. So apologies for that. But I was intrigued. Two questions. One was on the workforce planning, and where you mentioned about the age, showed the graph about the age, and that there are quite a few people between ages 40 and 69. And I think you mentioned the term that you were looking at a strategy of straightening out of age. And I just wondered what that strategy is going to be. So that's the first question. I don't know if you want to answer one at one. And then the other question, which is about the sickness absence. I think you mentioned that there were supporting roles. People had been appointed into supporting roles to support various departments. So I wondered what those roles were and what those people would be doing.
Right. Okay. So in terms of the workforce planning aspect, yeah, I mean, in terms of the age profile of the council, you know, you're quite right. You know, the vast majority or the biggest proportion of our employees are in the 40 to 60 age range. For me, you know, we need to have that identified with the various service areas and directorates, because you know the age profiles for each of those areas will vary. But as part of the sort of the workforce planning strategy going forward, it'll be taken into account of, you know, the age of that workforce, to ensure that as we move forward as a council, we have got resilience across our age ranges, to ensure that we've got that you know, the plans in place to support that workforce, to ensure that we've got succession planning in place, to ensure that, you know, we can attract the younger workforce into our organisation as well as our older workforce. And that's not meant as a sort of an ageist comment, because obviously, you know, people at all ages will have different levels of experience and skills and knowledge. So it's not a plan to you know, to reduce the number of older workers, shall we say, but just to reflect and recognise that in many respects we will need to ensure that we've got an organisation that's attractive to attract candidates from all areas of Swansea and at all age ranges of, in the sort of the employment market. Does that help answer your question?
A little bit like selective appointments then. So you know, this is how I wondered how you know, you either look to sort of have to look at a workforce and think, right, for succession, we either need to reduce the number of older people, but as they get older, they will retire. But of course, you can't say to people now, well, are you at an age of which you wish to retire, because that's ageist, which could be problematical. But then to get a younger person in, you obviously, as you said, you have to be able to, you know, encourage people to come forward. But then how do you are in a situation of having to be quite selective if you want to recruit younger people?
Yeah, Chair, could I come in on that bit if I can, Chair? Just before we get lost down this rabbit hole. So I think it's down to a bit of terminology. It's not that we're going to be selective. It's not that we're going to look to get younger people or older people. When we talk about flattening the curve, if you like, it's just about making sure that we are attracting across all aspects. So there are opportunities for apprenticeships at a young age, a middle age and an older age. The apprenticeships aren't just for young people, but it's making sure across the board, then everybody could apply for every job, regardless of where you are. We're not looking for a selective process in terms of age, but we are mindful, although people can work longer now into their life and you know, that aging workforce, we are still minded that there is still a natural cliff edge, if you like, of people retiring around the age of 60 plus. So if we've got a high bulk area, that's going to retire at somewhere between, let's say, 60 and 70, we just need to make sure that we've got a workforce coming through that have the skills, knowledge and experience to be able to fill those gaps if people choose to leave. So it is more about succession planning, and when we say flattening the curve, it's not really flattening the curve, it's just being prepared. So if that suddenly does fall, we have people ready, and it is about growing our own, but also about being the employer of choice for people to come to us rather than somewhere else.
Well saved, Adam, and probably a reflection on the terminology that perhaps should be used. Thank you. Sorry, Adrian. And the next question.
So the next question was about sickness absence officers. Yes. So to answer that question, you know, through the the sickness absence rates that we have across the council, we've identified that there are areas that need additional support, as was mentioned earlier on. So we have appointed in each of the directorates, or in the main directorates, I should say, in education, police and social services, a sickness absence officer that will support line managers, team leaders in making sure that the policy, sickness policy, is administered, and identifying wherever possible proactive ways to reduce sickness and avoid sickness happening in the first place. So really, in broad terms, that is the remit for that role.
Okay, thank you, Adrian. We go into now the 11 questions that we were going to ask for the pre-meeting. So I got Chris Ollie, he's got 2 questions to ask. Chris?
Thank you, Chair. The first one is about the about agency workers and about how are we going to, what's the word I'm looking for? How are we going to assess agency workers, and how are we going to manage it in the future?
Okay, so I mean, if I can come back to that in terms of the governance around agency workers, we have gone along to the audit committee on a couple of occasions now to assure the audit committee that we are that line managers are complying with the agency worker policy in terms of their appointment and management of those agency workers. We are regularly reviewing that. There's going to be a further audit this spring around that. And we are actively working with line managers to identify wherever possible opportunities for us to minimise the number of agency workers in their respective areas.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Hopkins, you want to come in?
Yeah, just to reassure, it's a bit of work I've taken on myself. I've sat with Adam. I've had a slight discussion with Adam and Adrian to set up myself to look at this, right, with Mark Thomas, to see what we can do, because obviously it is an area of concern for us all. But we must remember, obviously, during the pandemic, we had to recruit a number of additional agency staff during that time because of social distancing, hiring the different vehicles. So we knew we had to do that during that time. But it is something we're taking on board, Chris, and I give you a commitment that we will look at this and bring something back at a later stage.
Okay, my second question was attached to that anyway. Cyril, can you remind what it is?
Yeah, the area comes under a number of different portfolio.
Yeah.
I think you're talking about the cabinet members. It comes under a number of different portfolios. Yeah,
this is something which we used to have a HR department which covered all the departments, and one cabinet member covering that portfolio. Can we go back to that, because I think it's a far better system, and I don't know why we split it up. I know that supposedly to save money at one stage, I think, but I think the reality is that for the quality of service, HR, we need to have an HR department.
Adam, you want to come in on that?
Yeah, if I can. I won't get straight into the politics of which cabinet member, but what I can tell you is, and you may well have seen it, is that we've just gone out for a head of HR and service centre. We are bringing HR, OD and service centre back together to bring it all under me into one stream, so that we can look at the synergies between them, how all the connections happen, and it all works hopefully a little more seamlessly than perhaps it always does, being different separate units. I would imagine, and I suppose I'm speaking a bit for David here, I wasn't going to stray into the politics, but as we know, come May, we tend to relook, or the politicians do, in terms of where things are aligned. So I would imagine by then we will have got all the service back and realigned together under one, and I would have expected perhaps at that point it would be a good opportunity for probably for David, Rob and so on, to then have a look at how that sits perhaps under under one cabinet member, and happily take that back, because we are usually try and give some advice to where things should be feeding. So I'll try and take that back for you, Chris.
Okay, thanks, Adam. On to question 2.
Thank you.
Councillor Walton, you have 2 questions.
Yeah,
to ask.
thanks, Chair. One is more comment, and I know we've mentioned agency staff a lot this afternoon. I really just want to say that I'm pleased, very pleased, how many positions are now becoming more permanent, particularly how many traineeships have been introduced. So it looks like it's going in the right direction. So I'm quite reassured by that. So I'm not going to say any more about that. The other one I am a bit concerned at, but and I'm sure most of us are, but it's the situation in social services. And really, I'm just interested to know what measures have been done to try and actually recruit more people into that area, which I realise is suffering at the moment. And my hat's off to all people in social services over the last 2 years. How on earth that they've managed to carry on, God knows. So I mean, I have a lot of sympathy for people in that area, but also if there are gaps, I've got even more sympathy if some of the workers, staff we've got are trying to stretch themselves to cover any of the vacancies. So any comments, be very pleased to hear. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. Yeah, I totally agree with and share your concerns, as do I think all of the the senior members of the support social services and in social services itself. In terms of the recruitment activity, they have brought in an additional recruitment officer to look specifically at social services recruitment with a view to do something, should we say, a bit more proactive in respect of making those roles attractive to potential candidates. And in addition, our service centre are prioritising the recruitment or the advertising of those roles so that we can get those candidates into those roles as soon as possible. That's an ongoing task. I think you probably recognise that, certainly in the social care sector, because of probably levels of pay previously, and to some extent still, and the attractiveness of that role, those roles are not very easy to fill in some occasions. So that work will be ongoing. It's a problem that the social care sector as a whole, not just in Swansea, face, but we'll continue to work within Swansea and also with our neighbouring authorities to try and identify and work innovatively to get people into those roles in that sector.
Thanks, Adrian.
Yeah, thanks, Adrian. Just one last comment. Just like to say that again, I would say my hat's off to social workers, because I think the saddest thing is how often they hit the limelight only when they're being accused of letting families and people down. Whether there's anything you can do to try and recognise the staff in that area more so it balances that out a bit. Just a thought. Thank you.
Yeah, and again, I sort of do recognise and echo your comments there, Councillor Walton. At a sort of Welsh Government level, certainly there have been additional payments that have been made.
Don't mind me calling you Chris.
Not in the slightest.
Thanks for ringing back so quickly. Really appreciate it. My name's Rob Bazzini. I'm calling
Chris,
from
your phone call is coming over the air. There we are.
Right.
Okay, sorry for that, Ed.
Okay, no, that's fine. So yeah, just to say, Leslie, that Councillor Walton, that there has, at the Welsh Government level, there has been that recognition through additional payments. But again, I sort of echo your concerns that we do our best for those workers in that particular sector, as in other sectors, but obviously particularly in social care as well, social services.
Can I ask a question before Adrian comes in? Adam comes back in. know if your phone goes off in the chamber in a meeting, you normally got to pay into the Lord Mayor's funds. Does that apply with Chris Hawley now?
Yeah, tenner.
But anyway, Adam, can you
Yeah,
want to answer?
It was just to pick up a couple of bits that Leslie was talking about in terms of how are we changing the stance. So child and family and wider social services have developed, again with the support of Adrian and his team, a recruitment and retention strategy that operates right the way across social services. It's not just about pay, although obviously pay is important. It is about as we were talking earlier about the recruitment process that we go into, utilizing different channels that perhaps different people will have access to. So using more social media, using more Indeed and other providers are available in terms of recruitment platforms where we can go to get people and gain more traction with people. We're looking at around the staff morale through engagement and wellbeing work, so that again we have a happier workforce, more content workforce, because we're asking them to do some very difficult things in very difficult areas, and that has a toll as well on the individual. It's that healthy work-life balance, that agile and flexible working, and we touched on it earlier, but it's about looking at actually some people only want to work evenings, perhaps some people only want to work weekends or only want to work part-time. So it's how can we offer that flexibility that fits with their lifestyle, as well as obviously getting good quality candidates that we can work with. We support and develop our leadership through mentoring and coaching, and Adrian's done a really good piece of work at developing coaching and mentoring across the council, and social services particularly have really taken that on and got lots of coaching and mentoring for their senior staff and some of their middle managers to really help guide, support and help the workforce. There's a bit about culture as well with the organisation in terms of trust, empowerment, accountability across all the staff, and that empowerment really speaks volumes about people being trusted to get on and do their job, not being followed up all the time, but supported to have that true empowerment, not just delegation. And then finally, it's all around career development, opportunities for service-wide progression to work within adult and social care or go into child and family, give them that option to work across the services or work and gain experience across the council. And that's embedded through a training programme that we now offer so that people can attain skills, knowledge and progress through the ladder. So pay is one aspect, but all those other things make for that better quality workforce that we're looking for under our workforce strategy. So when we look at reward, yes, we definitely need to look at adult social care, child and family, but I could say the same as I think Joe mentioned earlier in terms of our refuse collectors, our parks, open spaces, environmental health. The list is endless. It's everybody across the council has had to do different things. And we're embedding this through the new workforce strategy to really capitalise on helping our workforce be the best they can be.
Thanks, Adam.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Councillor Philpott, you have 2 questions.
Thank you, Chair. Got very formal with me then. I'm a bit put off now. Yeah, I think the underlying theme of this meeting today is the support for the staff, and just to show how everybody really does care about the workforce that we've got. And that's what my questions relate to. We've had the results of the survey, which is really quite positive. However, the number of responses was very low compared to the rest. So it's really, how do we know? And it doesn't sort of like give us any indication of the practical basis of how staff are being supported at home. I mean, nationally, you look at the news and it'll say about pressures on people working from home. The trend over the last number of years is to have sort of open plan houses, where you haven't got that privacy. So if you're working from home and you're a family with a young family and children that have been home from school as well, you might be in a role where you have a confidentiality aspect to that role, or you might need quite a number of computers to be able to do your role. I'm thinking about planning, where they've got CAD drawings, etc. So it's how are we supporting those people to get the technology into their homes when they may not have enough room? Are they then offered to go into the office somewhere if they've got family commitments? You know, I do still see emails coming back quite late at night or very early in the morning. And I just wonder, you know, Adam mentioned about, you know, morale and having that happy life, work-life balance. So it is how do managers manage those responsibilities towards their teams, because of course teams don't come together that often now, and understand the difficulties, the practical difficulties that people may be having to juggle within their home environment. And the two questions really come together on that. So I don't know if you've understood the gist of what I'm trying to say, but it's that practical, how do people manage within their homes, and do we embrace the challenges?
Before you come in, Adrian, Adam has his hand.
Yeah.
Have you got to answer?
Yeah, I'm going to give it a stab at this one, and then I'm sure colleagues will support me as we go. I think, Cheryl, that there's some very good questions there and things that we've battled with over the last 2 years with COVID. In how do we best support our workforce? I think the first thing is remember, although it was to work from home, it's to work from home if you can work from home. That was the fundamental that we've maintained right the way through, and with support from the union. So where you've talked about where you've talked about things like CAD drawing, where you've talked about, you know, perhaps planners using big screens, economic development and so on, where there is a need for them to come in. Now, not all their work needs to be done on those big machines, but where they do, they were able to come in, and we managed the workforce securely to ensure that there was that provision. We also looked at people that perhaps were in difficult domestic situations, perhaps under caring responsibilities, or they had were in small accommodation and so didn't have the room to have that work-life balance. And again, they were encouraged when safe to do so and appropriately to come into the workplace and operate out of the workplace. There is a double-edged sword with that, though, and one of the things that we found is that actually you could find yourself more isolated coming into work because there were so few people than it was if you were staying at home in a more difficult situation. So we were balancing all of that, which is why we designated certain spaces within the building that were available for people to gain access to. So there was at least some level of safe but nonetheless human interaction. And again, what you'll see from the documents that were distributed with the agenda is that actually we've maintained regular contact with managers. So although it's not a huge sample that came through, 88% of those people that responded are in regular contact with their manager. We maintained regular team meetings, have continued to do so. So that hasn't changed. They're just like this rather than in a room, so that we could get that. But we've also continued all regular one-to-ones, team check-ins, and those team meetings. We've supplied lots of information for working from home about how to do it safely, how that people can make sure their mental health is protected, make sure that they have regular breaks, how to use VDUs at home, guidance on how they should set up a workplace at home to make sure they don't get any musculoskeletal issues or anything of that nature. We've done lots of courses on the learning pool, because again, the majority of people that are working from home, as you know, have access to computer and IT, which we were able to do, and supplied up-to-date kit, so they were able to do that. So again, we put on lots of e-learning about email stress awareness, preventing burnout, psychological first aid, again, all to support the workforce in terms of what they're doing and what they're delivering. I think the other part of your question was around confidentiality, and absolutely. But remember, we were already had an agile workforce that were already working from different sites, and it is the employee's responsibility to ensure that they are operating in a secure environment. So if they are working from home, then if they leave their computer, they still need to switch it off. There is no printing facility outside of the office, so they can't have papers coming and going. Our policy says they can't email to another email address, for example. So there's lots of training that was put in place to make sure that confidentiality was maintained, and certainly we take our role under GDPR very seriously, and that was enforced all the way through the use of IT, through the policies that people needed to sign and be made aware of on the move to home. So, and inevitably there's always going to be an element of risk, but we do have to trust our staff that they will take that seriously, as we all do, and I honestly believe they have, in making sure wherever they operate, it has been in a confidential and secure environment to safeguard any of the data that we have available to us. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Adam. Next question is Councillor James. Linda? You're on mute, Shugs.
Yes, that's it. Got it off at last. Right. The question I've got two questions. The first one was, I was concerned with the rising costs of electricity and heating about staff working from home and the extra costs of them. I did speak to Democratic Services and I was advised that they should apply for this through their tax. However, most of our staff, I am sure, don't fill in tax returns. They pay their tax through pay as you earn. So do we actually advise staff how they can claim this money back from the tax? Or are they just left to find out for themselves if they're aware of the facility at all?
Can I just jump in for there, Adam? Linda, Councillor Walton passed me an email from one of our colleagues, reference how to claim for tax from home.
Right.
And I've asked her, will she pass it around for all the members, all political members throughout the council? But perhaps, yes, and then Adam can perhaps then answer your question. What you originally asked. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, we make it readily available and have done since the very start of the transition to people working from home, and also during the previous Agile policy for anybody working from home. The information is available through our Agile policy. It's also been made available through our trade unions and the COVID-19 frequently asked questions. We've also done staff briefings, team meetings, been in Phil's blog, been in the staff newsletter. So we've pushed it out far and wide to make sure staff are available, have the available information at every opportunity. It's quite a straightforward process. And there's even a link, certainly within the frequently asked questions, to take you directly to the HMRC website to show you what you need to do, how you need to do it, and straightforward of what you can claim.
Thanks, Adam. Next question is Chris Ollie is going to be asking on behalf of Mary Jones. Chris?
Yeah, I can't, to be honest with you, I can't find the bloody question.
Okay, not a problem. I'll go through them. On page 19, looking at information on occupational health, what was the January figures like, Adrian or Adam?
That's probably too early to say. I can ask Craig Gimlett, our occupational health manager, to provide an update. Obviously, by the very timing of this meeting, to get the figures for January, by the time we go through the necessary processes to provide the report, we weren't able to provide the figures for January, but certainly I can go back and ask him that question.
I should imagine we could put that in our letter to
Sorry,
to
Chair,
the Cabinet
if I
member.
may, I did preempt that this question was going to be asked, so I have worked behind the scenes to get you the figures. So I can give you certainly the three figures. The first one is for the occupational health referrals. There are for January 101, which is up from the 94 from the previous month. There were 94 in December, 101 in January. Health surveillance again is up to 78 from 52, which was the previous month, and the counselling referrals is 55, which is I believe about there or thereabouts the same number. 53 last month, 55 this month. Not unusual for what we would be expecting as we're returning back to sort of a bit more life as normal at level 0. We would be seeing more transition. We'd be seeing more people ill, as everyone was expecting. So there's no surprises in that, and is being managed. We are strengthening the occupational health team for this year, as we've been doing all year, in order to make sure that we can respond to those in a timely fashion and make sure that the workforce is supported. So additional funding has been made available and extra resources put in place to support the staff.
Thanks, Adam. And the second question, return to work survey, very positive. Many people want to return to work, but council want people to work from home. Are we encouraging people to work from home? What kind of pressures are being put on people to working from home, if any?
So, Chair, if I can come in, I'm not sure that's what the survey says about returning. It says that they're confident to return to work, not that they're needing to return to work or otherwise. So there's slight difference, slight semantics, but there is a difference in terms of the question that we asked. So we are not looking for people at the current time to return back into workforce. We're still supporting the work from home if you can. And that is the mandate of the council currently, is to continue that. We're still at alert level 0. We're still seeing a high prevalence of COVID. We're still seeing clusters. So we are managing returning where people need to return to work. So there are some pressures, certainly around probably social services, some of the legal staff, for example, where it doesn't make good use of time to be travelling in for sessions in court, or where you're in the city trying to look after our adult social care, child and family residents. So we are managing at the moment in that where there is a demand and a need to return, then that's great, and we will support people coming back. But for now, and certainly for the foreseeable future, we are still managing. If you can work from home, continue to work from home.
Thanks, Adam.
Thanks.
David, do you want to come in?
Yeah, sorry. Could I just add to that? We could give a prime example. During the pandemic, or the midst of it, where we discovered that lots of social workers were struggling, particularly by working from home. They asked us, could they come into work, and could we support them to do so? Then a flexible approach to this, we certainly done that. We looked at the risk assessment. We discussed it with the trade unions. Nobody was forced to come into work. It was on a voluntary control basis where everybody was sufficient social distancing was in place in line with the risk assessment. So they requested to come into work, most of them, and during that time we did supply them with the adequate safeguardings to manage that. So it is a flexible approach. That's the only way I can describe it, but a managed, flexible approach along the way.
And Chair, if I can just take a little leniency from you, if I may, just to say, remember we started along this journey before COVID in terms of agile working. We have an agile policy about people working from outside of their workplace. We also have an accommodation strategy, which was again about moving people away from the building to other areas, be that at home, be that in a third-party premise, or in what will be a public sector hub. So what we're really moving into is the space of not COVID, but into that space of how do we manage our accommodation for the future and our workforce, which was always about people working away from the workplace rather than being at the workplace. So that was adopted by the council in terms of our accommodation and workforce strategy.
Can I say then, Adam, that I understand what you're saying, but I don't think the staff were very aware of that. I think that was sometime in the future. I don't think that was COVID related. But COVID has pushed it forward considerably, and I think that is the question mark: is how much now further forward are we, and what would be the basis in the future of flexible working? Are we going to be saying 1 in 10 or 8 in 10 will work from home, or what? I think that's the question, isn't it? That's the question on people's minds about how are we going to go forward with this?
Yeah, I think, Chris, you're absolutely on the money on that one. Our strategy was always to get, sort of really the civic building at some point was to move out of. So that kind of gives you an idea of the numbers that we were going to look at in terms of where we needed to move the accommodation strategy and the place for people to work. What currently is happening at the moment is that progression through that strategy into what are the numbers that we'll work to? How many people would be at? Is it a drop in a hot desk kind of situation rather than a seated? How do we work with our other partners in the public sector and work out of different sites? And that's kind of the next phase of it. And we have massively moved forward. What we don't want to do is go back to where we were before COVID and sort of reset the dial. What we want to do is learn by where we are now and then move forward. And I know Jeff and his team, and Jeff's on, and he may want to come in on the accommodation strategy. It's where we go next. And you're absolutely right, Chris. Where do we go next in terms of that? And we need to move quite quickly. And I know Jeff's done a load of great work across the council in certainly looking at our assets and how they're going to develop and what we can do with those in the future, supporting the workforce to work differently. So, Chair, with your agreement, it'd be great if I could bring Jeff in.
Yeah, I could see his hand up. So, Jeff.
Yeah, afternoon, everybody. Thanks, Adam, for that lead in. The situation is that, as Adam rightly said, agile working was something we were working on before the pandemic actually struck. So that did stand us in very good stead when it came to actually enabling, the vast majority of sort of office-based staff to work from home almost at a moment's notice. We were at final stages in terms of enabling all staff based in the Civic and the Guildhall to work in an agile environment, and the Civic was already actually sort of in the final stages of rollout. We're now moving to the Guildhall, and that will be done during the course of this year. The accommodation strategy that Adam was talking about is going to be informed by a number of things: the working practices before the pandemic, the working practices during the pandemic, and taking that further forward, all against the backdrop of what the business needs are. And that's obviously the most important thing. We're all here to do a job, and how we can actually work in a most efficient manner, whether from home or in the office, is the critical factor. We definitely need less space. That was evident before the pandemic. We need even less space now because we were all managing to sort of realise we can work in many cases in a more productive way. And I wouldn't mind making a very quick point in terms of the staff survey, because what was interesting, because it was seen as probably a slightly negative response, was the fact that 69% of staff said they were more productive the way they were working now. I think that's an incredibly high number in terms of it's not actually being more or the same, it's actually more productive. So that shows that we can be more efficient, but of course not for everyone. And as Councillor Philpott said, there are certain needs for certain staff who have to work in an office environment. We will be working through those figures during the course of this year, because this will inform our needs for a new city centre public sector hub once we vacate the civic centre, following the work we're doing with our appointed development partner Urban Splash. So that will happen during the course of this year, but we need to make sure, again, as Adam said, flexible accommodation, working in a very different way, not everyone coming in 5 days a week. Most people are suggesting they can work 2-3 days a week to have that human interaction and that sort of team building exercise work that's important in terms of getting the most and the greater efficiency out of the way we all work going forward. But obviously significantly reduced numbers. Before the pandemic, average occupancy was in the region of 50%. It's going to be less than that now, and I think so. We know that, but what we don't want to do is create a new office environment in the city centre to regenerate the city centre and find out it's too small day one. So we're working on that now, and we're pretty confident we've got the right sort of numbers. But it's engagement with the various heads of service and the senior managers to say what you need for the business now and going forward. And flexibility is key to that. And we're in a good place.
Thanks, Jeff.
Okay.
Cheers. Next question, Councillor Jones, Susan Jones.
Well, I think Adam has answered my questions. It was on the well-being of staff throughout all the departments, and I think you've answered that. And with particular reference to isolation for people working from home, I have been contacted within my ward from a particular lady whose mum died over the last year. She's working from home now and not seeing anybody. And I just wondered about that, but I think you've answered that question as well for me. So thank you.
Next question is by myself. Sickness, absence. What support are staff working from home with sickness getting? But what I'm trying to get into the answer there is there's different sorts of sickness. There's ones where, they got COVID and they can work. There's some that can't. But what I'm wondering, have you got any feedback on long COVID? Have we got any staff out there suffering with that? And what sort of support are we giving them?
Yeah, if perhaps come in on that particular point, there is a protocol, a long COVID protocol that's been established across the local authorities in Wales, whereby they are protected from reductions in sick pay if they are suffering from long COVID. The number of cases that we have in Swansea, and that's reflected elsewhere, are minimal. So from that point of view, there is that protection for them that's currently in place. That's in the process of being reviewed, because we have to consider issues of equality and fairness across other long-term illnesses to ensure that we don't put anybody at a disadvantage, if you like, in respect of that. The same principles would apply for any sickness absence, in terms of the policies and support that's available via our occupational health teams, again via the sickness absence officers that have been appointed, and through various helplines and support in different situations.
Thanks, Susan. The next question, I think it's already been answered, is from Isle Morris.
Sorry, could I just come in on that one, sir? I couldn't get my hand up in time, sorry.
Okay, no problem.
Just to take that a step further, as Adrian said, this is something that's under review. This is a scheme that the WLGA and all the leaders signed up to. It is coming to an end. I know that the leaders are keen to have this discussion with the WLGA, but that discussion hasn't taken place at this moment. So it is in existence. I believe numbers affected during December, I think we had about 16 people that was actually was having the benefits out of that agreement at this time, but it might have altered since January. But in December, I know it was roughly about 16, 17 people.
Okay, thanks, David. Councillor Morris, Cecil.
Well, as you said, the questions I was going to ask has been bit by bit asked by the councillors. There's very little else except really if one of us finds we've got more than one question and more than one problem, such as someone mentioned, you can go to the tax office and get some help back for heating and use an extra room in your house. We might have a medical question. We could have another member of the family having to join us at home. If we have more than one question, is there a scheme or is there anywhere that we could perhaps send one email into County Hall with 3 or 4 questions on them and have a message back to cover the all, not for us to have to track down 4 or 5 different places we could go, which could take us a week in some cases to track them all down. And that's basically, you've got a one-stop shopping for the clients to come in to do the electric, gas, plumbing and all together if they want to. And perhaps is there anywhere we could just, as you said, send an email and have an answer to more than one parts of problems?
Adam, I could see you want to answer.
Yeah, certainly when you come into the council, when we're able to do so, that you can do more than one thing at one time. We have multi-skilled staff available at our customer service points to be able to deal with multiple channels that they can get through to. From a councillor point of view, if you have any questions within any of the services that we have, by all means, I may well regret this, but certainly until we've got a head of HR and service centre, send them in to me. No problem at all. Happy to take any questions from any councillor on any part of a service, even if it's not mine. Part of my role as Deputy Chief Exec is to make sure that all members, regardless of party, regardless of political persuasion or any other, is to support answering any of those questions. So by all means, fire whatever email in with whatever questions, and as most of the staff know, I'll just fire it on to the relevant teams to come directly back to you.
Well, you probably know who to send to it, as some of us wouldn't,
Absolutely, yeah. But by all means, use me, and my PA will usually do most of that legwork, because she knows even better than I do about who's going to answer it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Adam. Next question is by Cheryl.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. I've had to switch my camera off because I've been in and out of Wi-Fi, so apologies for that. Jeff mentioned earlier on about the staff survey on productivity, saying that 69% of staff felt they were more productive. But I just wondered how that reflects in the council's sort of like figures and stats. The reason I asked the question, because I was absolutely amazed a few days ago to find out that the land registry, because staff have had to work from home, are 1.5 million cases behind. So I thought that was quite shocking. So I just wondered how, that relates to us within our corporation. Not the impact of the land registry, but as far as our productivity is concerned.
Okay. Great, Chair, if I may. This is a really difficult one to answer because there's so many factors that affect it. Generally, what we know from the feedback from our leadership team members, from the staff survey, is that productivity is good, and we're hearing from a lot of the staff that they feel more productive. They don't have to travel, say, between Swansea and Cardiff for meetings, which is time which they'll never get back. So there's a lot more productivity time that people can operate within rather than the downtime of travel. Obviously, that helps our carbon footprint also in terms of not travelling between various different buildings. Part of the knock-on, though, of COVID is the illnesses and the effect that we have it with other businesses that we link into and relate to, meaning that we can't always get things done as quickly because perhaps they don't have the workforce. As you say, land registry, which is behind, well, we do rely on some of that information to come through if we're progressing some of our capital projects, for example, or housing. So it does affect us in terms of the knock-on of other teams and other stakeholders that we'd link in with, making, although we're productive in what we can do, we just can't always complete that part of that process in order to get there. I think that's not going to be an easy solution, and certainly as the as we come to an endemic rather than a pandemic, we are going to see more illness. We're going to see more business affected. We are going to see more people that perhaps aren't at their desk to answer, and so we will see a push-pull kind of situation about how we can start and finish projects, but that doesn't take away from the productivity of our staff. Because what they do is just run, they spin multiple plates all at the same time to make sure that happens. The other thing I'd say is that a lot of our staff have been asked to pick up other duties that perhaps isn't their normal day job. So they may well be very productive, but doing something completely different to what they would normally do. So the stats for their area perhaps won't show the same as what they would have done previously, because we haven't got that same workforce doing the same job all the time. So it's a bit difficult to show in its entirety, but hopefully that gives you some comfort that where we can monitor, we do, and we are productive. Where we're reliant on others, then sometimes there can be delays. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Adam. Appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks, Ad. Next question. We need you there, boys and girls. Next question, Councillor Linda James.
Thanks, Chair. This question has partially been answered, that you've said that when staff are coming back into the offices, that sickness levels are going up. And I was wondering, do we know the number of staff that are actually working from home whilst they're ill, especially with COVID? I'm not suggesting that any managers are pressurising them to carry on working, but I know a lot of them have done, mainly because they feel the pressure of the work that they have, and they know that their departments are short of staff. I've been in correspondence with one officer this week, and then actually had a conversation with him this morning to find out he's got COVID and his whole family is also at home with COVID. So although he obviously knows he can't go out and meet anybody on site, he's still continuing to work while he's unwell. So do we have any idea of the number of staff that this applies to?
Adam?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. If I may, yeah, just a few points to make, and then I'll certainly answer that question. I think the first thing, just to clarify, is that people aren't getting ill because they're coming back into the office. Jeff has done a brilliant job in securing our buildings and making sure we are COVID safe. Him and his team working again with the unions, brilliant in terms of we're not seeing the transmission coming from within the workplace. What we are seeing is as the COVID restrictions are released in the community, that more people are mixing, more people are going about their normal business, going to concerts and so on, and we're seeing that transitional phase where people are catching COVID. But I just didn't want that reported anywhere, because I know this is recorded, that it sounds like we've got a problem in the offices, because we haven't. Jeff and his team have done a really good job on that. Yeah. Second bit, in terms of COVID, so people may well have COVID, but they may not be ill. So you can have COVID and be asymptomatic. So the fact, again, that the processes that we've put in place are that before you come anywhere near the workplace, you'll do a lateral flow test and make sure that whether you are or not positive. If you are positive, you need to continue to isolate or remain isolated, or isolate if you weren't already, because you'd already identified symptoms. So we may have a lot of workers that unfortunately have to isolate because they are positive, but actually are fit to work, fit to do their job, and actually no issues whatsoever with them doing it. And it may well be the rest of the family members also have COVID, but are not really affected in terms of an illness. So, but that would be a stat. We do record everybody that is off ill with COVID. We support them, make sure they can get whatever they need in terms of having to isolate at home if they don't have others that can fetch and carry for them and supply everything. We have all the stats in relation to if you have COVID and you're isolating, if you're looking after somebody with COVID, they're all there on our dashboard to make sure that we're aware of the workforce. Not seeing huge numbers, thankfully, and we're managing that workforce to ensure that if anybody is ill, and we do have a number that are ill, and those number we make sure that we look after. We are in regular contact under our sickness policy to make sure that we regardless of what the sickness is, COVID is just another sickness like anything else. If they're not fit to work, we expect them not to work, and that's the bottom line, regardless of what their illness is. And we would support that wholeheartedly and look after the workforce. So if they are fit to work, though, and some people, all kinds of sickness, they may find that first thing in the morning that they're not very well. By lunchtime, we've all had it, coughs and splutters, and then by lunchtime, whatever it was, you've worked through and you're fit to work again. Previously, if you weren't coming into work, it'd be you've lost the whole day. actually they're fit to work in an afternoon. So they'll work in the afternoon, and some will say, well, rather than actually lose half a day or something else, they might work into the evening. Also, part of COVID is what we've tried to do is support the workforce to be flexible. If you've got caring responsibilities, for example, with children, we would enable staff to perhaps not work in the morning, where it's not daytime dependent on what their job is. And, you know, if they're doing some sort of admin role, that they could work in the evening, perhaps when a partner, family member or other could come and look after childcare, they may prefer to work in an evening because that suits their life. It also suits the demands on the council, so we'd offer that flexibility. We monitor that through our managers to make sure they're not doing excess hours or working at both ends of the day, and we'll work through and make sure that we're flexibly managing to suit the needs of the council and the needs of the employee. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Adam. You certainly earned any money today. Right, finally, and last but not least, Councillor Walton, you have 4 questions to ask, all on surveys. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I'm asking, as it's one of my pet interests, I'm asking on behalf of 2 or 3 of us, to be honest. First, question number 1, are we considering doing a follow-up survey to the one that we did last summer? Do you want me to do one at a time, Rhiannon, or do you want me to do the whole lot? I'm assuming it's you. Sorry,
yeah, it'd be me or Adam. So one at a time would be great, I think.
Right. Okay. That was the first question. Are we going to do another survey as a sort of follow up just to the survey that we did last summer?
Yeah, I mean, usually we do them annually, so it's an annual staff survey, but there certainly may be an opportunity to do more sort of streamlined follow-up surveys, but that's going to be based on discussions with unions which have already been underway. So at the minute, the plan is to stick to annually, but if any kind of ad hoc surveys do arise, then we can keep members updated on that.
Okay.
Chair, if I just may, absolutely right what Rhiannon says, bang on. I think the other thing we need to be mindful of is survey fatigue, that we keep banging out surveys. You know, lots of people are sending out surveys and then people just switch off from them. So we decided that annual is best for this one, so that we can get some trend analysis and data over the year. But there may be other surveys that we do want to do to pick up specific aspects rather than the generality of this picks up. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Ad.
Right. Well, following on from that, in a way, I can see your point about survey tiredness. Good. I've fed in the past comments to Rhiannon, things that I get concerned about surveys, mainly as much as anything from my own experience of doing them. And one thing that I find, and I'm sure this is true of loads of people, that if I'm not happy with a survey, by the time I've got to about question 3, that's it. I'm just going to come out of it. I won't bother with it. And one of the things that I think I find is even when you give the totally agree, nearly agree, maybe not, etc., sometimes that is even then slightly too constrained. And I always like to see a comments box. And even if you don't do a comments box every question, have one somewhere where they can write whatever they like, even if it's something that they want to comment on that you haven't even asked. Because sometimes I think the danger we fall into is asking the questions we want the answers to, and sometimes we should be making it far more open-ended because we want to hear what they think. And what I was going to say right at the beginning was, I'm sure most of us are here this afternoon mainly because we obviously care about our staff. And if we don't know what our staff are thinking, and sadly we've only heard from about a fifth of them, then what about all the rest? How are they faring? Are they the positive percentage of the answers, the responses we have got? So I'm all for making surveys as simple as possible, but also as open to the person that you're directing it at. So they definitely have a chance to give their views and also put things where you're not necessarily asking those questions. Sorry, I've gone more on a talk rather, or an opinion. But Rhiannon, I don't know if you want to sort of come back on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think I can understand where you're coming from, Leslie. I know we've had discussions about it before. I think it's a balanced approach, really. Obviously, we need those statistical information to get that overall picture for staff. We've done various different types of lengths of survey. We've had a longer survey, shorter survey. We've kind of gone through the houses in terms of survey design. We found that staff actually preferred a shorter, snappier survey, even though the responses for this particular survey didn't kind of follow through on that. But that could be for other reasons. So yeah, it's a mixed approach, really. And I think, you know, there were options for staff to voice their comments in comment boxes within the survey. I haven't provided you with the text comments because there were quite a few, but I think it is something to bear in mind for future surveys. I'm not sure if you wanted to add anything there, Adam.
Yeah, thanks, Rhian. Yeah, so within the survey, there were some boxes in order for comments to be put in, which were free text. There is a balance to be struck with free text, though, just in terms of making sure that we've got trend data. So we need the sort of happy through to sad or good through to bad, so that we have a consistent approach that everybody must answer. The text box, we could get so many comments that the actual collation of the data come the ends becomes so difficult because there's so many points that the officer time in investing in that we just don't have anymore to be able to do that. So Rhian's managed to get a really good balance between asking those questions and getting that scale, and where we can give them an opportunity to add, you know, why have they said this, or why have they said that, or why do they feel this, that's in there also. So it's getting that balance. Do we always get it right? Probably not. And that's probably my fault, not Rhian's, because I then tend to meddle in some of these questions come the end, and she's the expert. But it is, you know, pretty good in terms of getting the responses, but giving a free text box to get some key data as well, or some more specifics.
So did Adrian want to come in? Sorry,
Yes,
sorry,
Adam froze on me then, so I didn't catch the end of what Adam said. But just to reflect that in respect to the workforce strategy questions in the survey, there was an opportunity for staff to comment. You know, we did go through those comments and identify any particular trends or suggestions for improvement in respect to those specific questions. But I do take Adam and Rhian's point, and I agree with them that, you know, in terms of, you know, allowing, should we say, you know, freer reign, if you like, to add statements can sometimes distort the picture, but certainly where we can, we will.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I can see your point. It's just that sometimes I think somebody's when they're let loose and just writing what they think, you can get some really useful insights, maybe just to one or two of those comments that gives you just a bit more to go on to sort of plan for the future.
Chair, if I may, just to come back in on that, I think what we need to remember is that, so this is a staff survey which picks up a particular data set that we come through to. What we have on top of this is team meetings, we have focus groups, we have working groups, we have all kind of protected characteristic groups, we have poverty groups, all of which have opportunities for staff to feed in different ways. And as a CMT, we take all that information and bring that together, where staff have got, you know, I do road shows, I go in and meet different teams, where staff can tell me exactly what they're feeling about, and most of them do, and they're quite verbose almost in terms of what they say. So that's excellent that they feel strongly that they can share. And obviously a lot of that's had to be online. And one of the things we've been looking at, and Rhian's been heading this up with unions and so on, is how do we focus in on the frontline staff that is more difficult to get hold of, and that is one of the things that came out of this survey, is the response from frontline workers wasn't as great as we would have liked it to be. And how do we engage with them differently going forward to make sure, because they used to do sort of the toolbox talks, they used to go down to perhaps the depot, they'd have a team meeting, handed a piece of paper, made to fill it out before they left, sort of thing. Probably not that quite that autocratic in that way, but nonetheless it was kind of controlled, so they'd fill it out. Obviously now this different way of working, they don't meet in the same ways they did before, so we need to find different ways of approaching them. And Rian, as she went through the paper that was presented, gave you some of that output that came from unions and some of our work groups, and we're continuing to look at that, about how do we engage with all of our workforce, rather than it's easy on email because you've got an email address you can go into, or online. It's harder if you're not e-savvy or utilizing it as most of us do every day. So there is a tension there, a difficulty that we're working through, that hopefully we'll see those numbers improve going forwards.
Well, I'm certainly pleased to hear how many different routes you try and use, i.e. you do use hard copies, email, whatever, etc., etc. So I mean, you can only do so much. So I mean, I totally sympathise on that level, and that you sound as though you're doing as much as you can do on that score.
Rian, you want to come in?
Yeah, just to go back on the comment side of it, Councillor, just so you know, obviously all the responses that we do get, text copies, text comments, every head of service will get their own individual results and the series of text comments that comes underneath it, so they can then use that to inform the action plan then for the next financial year. So they'll be getting that from me shortly. So all those comments are considered by those heads of service, along with all the other information that they've had from their team meetings, etc. To feed into kind of what happens next then in terms of how staff feel and kind of the steps that need to be taken by those heads of service. So just to let you know that. Okay,
thanks. So that, right, okay. I've got a couple more questions that Mary Jones wanted to put. One, she said she felt she got the impression the survey was geared more towards people working from home. And how do staff who have to go out and work feel? I'm not sure that one.
I think personally, I think Jeff, Adam, and
yeah,
Rian
no, happy to.
that.
I'll then pass on to Rian if there's anything else to add in. I think you're right. I think it was geared a bit more towards home working, only because home workers have got the greatest transition from where they were to the home, and kind of in some ways most affected in terms of that change. A lot of the frontline workers were still doing the job that they were, refuse didn't stop, we still picked up, it went into the parks, we still did a lot of those jobs, were maintained as business as usual, just slightly differently. And perhaps in some of the questions we asked, and that may be partly why we didn't get the response back from the frontline workers that we wanted to get back. And I think it's a learning exercise for all of us, in terms of, perhaps we didn't get it on the money, in terms of how do we focus in them. Obviously, since then, we've made sure that we do engage with all the frontline staff through team briefs and team meetings, to make sure we check in through, as I've already mentioned. I won't go back through how we check in with all the staff, but again, we've done it a different way just to make sure that we have picked up any issues. How are people feeling? What are they? But many of the frontline services just continued, and that was recognised very early on in the meeting about, right the way through the pandemic, our frontline staff have been front and centre delivering those services time and time again in very difficult situations. And again, I know the thanks has come from everyone, and again from me. It's been brilliant, the dedication from all the team, both frontline and back office.
Right, I've got one final one. On confidentiality when doing a survey, I mean, I'm certainly aware that in the past sometimes, and it's quite understandable, you need to know where the person is working to have, for the information to be worthwhile enough, because obviously different departments, you might have a sort of different approach. Are you able to ensure that the surveys that you do are totally confidential under those circumstances?
Yeah, I mean, the results only come to me in terms of the process. Obviously, someone fills in a survey, either being by online or hard copy, and only I get the kind of final sort of raw data, if you like. When the heads of service or CMT get the results, they will just get those overall percentages and just the kind of anonymized text comments afterwards. So in that respect, yes, it's completely confidential.
Okay.
Although I can see why in the past we did ask pay number, for example. We don't do that anymore because some staff felt that that they could be identified by that. Obviously, we have to ask what head of service area they belong to, otherwise we won't be able to identify or provide that information to heads of service. But yeah, as far as I'm concerned, it's completely confidential.
Okay. Thank you.
Chair, if I can just come in, yeah, I just want to echo that because I think that's a very important point. I think on two levels. One, we have to maintain that confidentiality. You know, it's very important, and you know, I don't get to see who's filled them in. I don't get to see any of that, and if I'm brutally honest, I'm not really interested. What I want to know is the facts that come out of it. I think there's a bigger piece for me, and we're hopeful we'll address this more in the new workforce strategy. Is that I want to work in an organisation and lead an organisation that is open to challenge and open to criticism, so that we can learn properly. So, you know, what I really want to get to is a culture within the organisation where people feel that they can comment openly, even if it's a criticism, so that we can move on and we can do things better. And the only way we can do that is if we can truly get the workforce to give us their true opinion of what they're feeling. So that's certainly my aim, and certainly since the day I started, that's what I will say, that anyone can talk to me in confidence and say whatever they feel, because it's important that we hear it right at the top, but right through the organisation. So although, yes, I'm happy that it is confidential, I would hope that if somebody really has got an issue, they would feel that they can raise it with either me, HR, they can raise it with their manager or somebody to make sure that we hear their concerns and then act on it. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Adam.
Thank you.
That's it. Well, before we go into agenda item 7, I'd like to thank Adam, Adrian, Rhiannon, and Jeff Bacon, and all the other officers that I failed to mention for their time, and thank you for the report. It was well written, and I too would like to, I know we've expressed our thanks to all our backroom staff and all social services, but I feel as well we really need to thank those boys that are out there tramping the streets with collecting our waste. So if you'd like to pass on my thanks to them, big thank you from not just from me, from the members. If you'd like to leave now, we're going to go into a closed session, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members.
Thank you, all of you.
I am trying to leave, don't worry. I can't get out.
I'll throw you out now. There we are. That's it. I think everybody have left. Okay. Agenda item 7, the discussion and conclusion. Working group members will now, we can discuss what we've heard, and we can put that into a writing in a letter to the cabinet members or whatever. Any points? Let's start from the top. Leslie, any discussions or conclusions? Recommendations? Les, could you hand up?
Well, personally, I feel that the last couple of hours has been very useful. I feel very reassured by the candour of all the officers who have spoken, and I mean, I'm quite happy if others have got questions, but at the moment, I would much rather show support for what they are actually doing, and concur that I think what they're doing is they're going in the right direction, and I feel quite reassured by what they've the answers that they've come out with this afternoon. But of course, I mean, others, if you do want particular questions you still feel we need to look at, fine, but that's my personal feeling. Thanks, Phil.
Can I just interrupt and tell him I'm running out, so I'm sorry I won't be able to keep it in more than perhaps a few seconds longer. Sorry, I've got 2% left on my thing, so if I go blank out, that's the reason. Sorry, but I'll carry on listening as long as I can.
Okay. Share any points you might make?
As I say, like Leslie, Sue it is, yeah, I think that they've answered all the questions very well and are quite open with what they are saying. One thing that maybe they could help with is the tax situation for heated at homes, to make certain that the staff have got all that information that they can actually apply for. But I think they were really open with the questions and their answers.
I'm sure Liz will make a note of that point. Lind? No, nothing. Share?
Yes, as everybody said, I think the questions were answered more than adequately. I apologise for not having seen that report. I thought that it was brought, the one for today, because I saw the date on it. So that was a bit of a shock for me. So obviously I need to read through all my reports and not just 3 of them. I thought that Adam came across very, very strongly and perhaps compensated for some of the comments that may have not been made quite correctly by some of the other officers, particularly when I asked about the thing about the straightening up. And I think that, as Adam said, I think that I better rescue us from this rabbit hole before we go down it. And I thought it was very well made, because we were setting off into the age structure of that point. So, but I felt that what Adam said last was very genuine when he said that he wanted to be working and leading an organisation where there was an honest culture, and he came across as being extremely genuine, and any concerns I might have had were relayed at that point. So, and you know, some of the questions I thought were quite straightforward. The answers weren't as straightforward as what I had anticipated. Things like the question about productivity. Well, yes, as he said, we think we're okay, but we are dependent on other agencies, external agencies, like even the land registry, because obviously if searches are being done and the council, people have applied to the council to do searches, that they are dependent on people like the land registry to have made sure that their records are up to date, as are, you know, many other agencies that they're dependent on. So, and I thought, well, yeah, that was a really good answer. So I feel very confident that we are progressing in the right way. I think, going on from Leslie's questions, there does need to be some way of getting better, a higher response to the questionnaires that go out, to the surveys. But I do think that is difficult for every organisation. You know, I do remember being in one organisation where we were mandated to complete a questionnaire. It was in a brown envelope. I don't think there were any reference numbers on there, but they wanted, and you had to tick that you had completed that questionnaire, so they had 100% response. But that was quite draconian, and I got to say, it was 30 years ago, and working practices were a lot different 30 years ago. I don't think unions would allow a mandated survey now. But that's the only way you're going to get a full survey back, isn't it? So I was, very, very reassured.
Yeah, on that, I think, Cher, we just got to try and encourage, officers to put out an hard copy. And as Adam said, even if they got to go down there physically and just ask them a bit of your time.
But even that could be threatening to some members of staff.
Yes, I suppose so. Yeah,
It's
you've got to
quite
be
a
careful.
sensitive. Yeah.
Yvonne, have you got any conclusions?
Sorry, Chair, I don't have anything to add. Leslie said a lot of what I was thinking, but this last point about the survey, I'm not sure, because I don't feel it gives a true reflection. Let me put it like that. Yeah. For the small number of people who fill it into the number of staff we have. But what Cheryl was saying about mandating, I wonder if there could be something perhaps when someone has a contract with us, that is part of you're expected at some point to do these, and not mandate, but we expect something to more encourage. And when the presentation was being met, one of the things I wondered was maybe a raffle,
a night out with somebody.
A night out with Adam.
Well, but some sort of hook to get the surveys done.
Yeah, some sort of encouragement.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'd bake them a cake, but it could be something like all the surveys will be put in a hat, and the one that comes out, but some sort of encouragement.
Yeah.
But otherwise, that's it. I think Cheryl and everyone has, but Cheryl and Leslie in particular has voiced a lot of those things I was thinking and feeling.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Yvonne. Liz, I'd like to ask a question here. Obviously, Chris Holly had to leave. Obviously, he's at another meeting. Is it possible to contact the ones that left before time? Is it possible, or, well, no, I'll rephrase that. The ones that stayed mostly throughout the meeting, and ask them in an email, have they got any conclusions and what they want to put to officers?
Liz is very good at putting something together, and I'm sure she'll put something together, sent out to everybody for their comments.
There we are. Sue?
Yeah. That might be the best way to do it, Cyril. If I go through and pick out everything, that I think was raised, and if there's anything then that's missing, maybe send it out to all of the working group, and to any of the ones then who are to leave early will have the opportunity to come back if they want to.
Yeah, that's brilliant, because I totally agree with what members have said by you now. 100% back them, and if we can put that all in writing, I'll be more than happy.